Hello and welcome to this Maundy Thursday reading and reflection. The Gospel reading is from the 13th chapter of St John's Gospel, traditional one for Maundy Thursday. Now, before the festival of the Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The devil had already put it into the heart of Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray him. And during supper, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, got up from the table, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around himself. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with a towel that was tied around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus answered, "You do not know now what I am doing, but later you will understand." Peter said to him, "You will never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you will have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not only my feet, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "One who is bathed does not need to wash except for the feet, but is entirely clean. And you are clean, though not all of you." For he knew who was to betray him. For this reason he said, "Not all of you are clean." After he had washed their feet, he put on his robe and had returned to the table. He said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for that is what I am. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have set you an example, that you also should do as I have done to you. Very truly I tell you, servants are not greater than their master, nor are messengers greater than the one who sent them. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them." When he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I'm with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." A reflection on the passage we have just heard from St John's Gospel. Today, Maundy Thursday, sees us in lockdown, separated from our friends and families, and many of us concerned for ourselves and for those we love. So what possible relevance can the events of 2,000 years ago have for us today in this situation? Well, you may be surprised. Let me put the reading we've just heard into context. The events depicted in this reading happen as Jesus shares a meal with his closest friends. No social distancing there. Jesus knew he was about to be betrayed and given over to the authorities to suffer and to die. In fact, it was the very next day that he was stripped, flogged, and crucified. Jesus knew this, and in the midst of his anguish about the unfolding events, he takes the time to equip his disciples for the future. This enforced lockdown has left many of us fearful. How will we cope with what's happening and with what's to come? Not such a different context after all, and one we can certainly learn from. There's something about Maundy Thursday that can make us squirm. One of the ancient practices of the church on this day is to submit to having your feet washed. I've heard many discussions in church circles about whether they should adopt that practice. Does it culturally translate? Maybe it's a bit awkward. But there's something about God's love that can make us feel uncomfortable. The term Maundy in Maundy Thursday comes from the Latin, and you can tell I'm not a Latin scholar by my pronunciation, mandatum or commandment, from Jesus' words in the reading we've just heard. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you're to love one another. Now, the command to love, of course, was nothing new. But the command to love in the manner that Jesus has loved, that is new. And the command to love, having been loved first by Jesus, that is new. One of the challenges of the lockdown is this. How do we keep communications, maintain contact, develop friendships, look after those we love where we're not allowed to touch, visit, or often even to see them? Of social media, of course, Facebook, FaceTime, WhatsApp, Zoom, and many others have literally been a godsend, as the ancient technology of the telephone and Royal Mail perhaps more than ever have been. Receiving a card through the post can mean so much at this time. Maybe what we're currently negotiating is how to love using new tools. And that's what Jesus was doing here. He was using the lowly, humiliating, but necessary act of foot washing, normally delegated to the lowliest of servants, as a tool to demonstrate how earthy, how visceral God's love is. Not some mushy romantic thing involving hearts and flowers, as lovely as they can be. It is difficult to find a contemporary cultural equivalent for the washing of another's feet in Jesus' day. A number of years ago, a traveller by train in India saw that it was the lowest caste people, often those with disabilities, who were cleaning the trains. They did it by crawling on their bellies across the floor and gathering up rubbish and food which had been dropped with their clothes. And they were largely ignored because their work is so humiliating. Do you get something of the utter, raw, appalling significance of what Jesus does here when he takes off his outer garment and drops to his knees to wash feet? We can hear the shock in the voices of the disciples who are so embarrassed by his actions. Jesus, their master, their Lord, is crawling on his belly, gathering their filth. The Creator on his knees. The verbs John uses for Jesus laying aside his outer clothing and putting it back on are not the usual ones. They're the verbs John uses elsewhere in his gospel when Jesus says he will lay down his life only to take it up again at the resurrection. The foot washing, this whole scene is a picture, a parable of the greater humiliation of God. Mocked, spat on, stripped, bruised, bleeding, stretched out, naked, nailed to a cross, the death of a common criminal. Understand the breathtaking servant love of our God, who serves us right at the point of our need, who loves in humility, who gives up his rights and privileges, who loves in an utterly costly way, who loves even under pressure. The cross was just hours away after all, who loves unconditionally. After all, these men would by the end of the night betray him, desert him, or deny him. Yet he lovingly washes all their feet, even Judas's. And he loves in self-forgetfulness. He doesn't care that he loses face. He isn't concerned for his own self-image. Here is the God who stoops, who serves, who gives everything, who gives his life that we might live. And Jesus says, a new commandment I give to you. Love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. But Jesus doesn't just give us the manner in which we're to love. He also gives us the means by which we're to love. As I have loved you, so you must love. See the order. First be loved, then loved. First know, realize, appreciate, and then do. First receive Jesus' love, and then pass it on. But receiving is hard for us. It humbles us. We like to provide for ourselves. You can't love me, God. I haven't had the chance to prove my own worth yet. And so we resist. You shall never wash my feet, says Peter. But Jesus answers, unless I wash you, you have no part in me. It reminds me of those tender moments I've witnessed when someone cares for the physical needs of an infirm one. Maybe helping feed or wash them when they can't do it for themselves. For those of us who are able-bodied, the idea of submitting to that is startling, humiliating, weird. But the truth is, spiritually we are infirm, utterly dependent. We can only serve like Jesus if we are first served by Jesus. We can only love as he has loved if we are first loved by him. We must overcome that aversion, lay down our pride and let him serve us. And Jesus says, apart from me, you can do nothing. Nothing. God knows about the toll and suffering brought by coronavirus. Maundy Thursday reminds us that God the Father sent his only Son, who willingly came as a lowly slave to serve us, to be humbled, and to lay down his life for us. But let's not forget that at the end of this Holy Week, we will experience the joy of Easter, that however hard the situation, God's love will ultimately triumph. Friends, we are in receipt of incredible love. We're here on this special day to experience that love again. We're here to be fed so that we might go out and feed others. So let us claim afresh for ourselves the love that Jesus brings. Then, following his instruction, let us love one another as he has loved us. Amen.